very good evening and a warm welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. We're coming to you from the Serena Conference Center. And tonight we'll be speaking about gender-based violence with a special focus on child violence. I'll quickly introduce my panel for this evening, and I'll start right next to me. We have Hassan Sekajolo, who is the program officer at Straight Talk Foundation.
Yes.
Welcome, Hassan. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, and at the end, we have Noor Nachibuka Msisi, who is a Director of Programs at the Center for Health, for Human Rights and Development, CEHAD. Welcome, Noor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's say it as it is. Once again, thank you for joining us. And this particular episode of the show is brought to you in partnership with the Sexual Reproductive Health Rights Alliance Uganda. And just to give you some information on that, the current membership of the alliance comprises a number of other organizations, including Reproductive Health Uganda, Reach a Hand Uganda, Straight Talk Foundation, Family Life Education Program, Center for Health, Human Rights and Development, Uganda Network of Young People Living with HIV and AIDS, Restless Development, and National Forum of People Living with HIV and AIDS Network in Uganda. I will start the show with a couple of statistics that will help us set the stage for our conversation. An annual report by the Uganda Police Force indicates that gender-based violence cases reported and investigated in 2015 and 2016 increased by 4% from 38,651 to 40,258 cases. Now, this shows that despite efforts made to reduce sexual SGBV, the vice has continued to prevail among different communities in Uganda. And some more statistics: a 2016 Uganda Demographic and Health Survey revealed that up to 22% of women and girls aged 15 to 49 in the country had experienced some form of sexual violence. The report also revealed that annually 13% of women aged 15 to 49 report experiencing sexual violence. Well, just before we start our conversation, the report from the police force shows that this increase is in the cases that are reported. Do we have any idea, or are there any plans, or is there any way we can look into the cases that are not reported? Because this is a huge number, so if these are reported, there is a big problem.
Exactly. Thank you so much. I think the obvious is that the courage within the communities to report cases is there. But again, the number of those that do not report cases is many. So the question would then be, who empowers the communities to actually have that courage to report? Again, to those that do not come to police, who monitors? Because some cases might not come to police, but perhaps are reported to different institutions and agents or people. So maybe we should turn around and think through what happens to even these that are reported to police. Are they just coming and registering that police is reporting, or are they cases that police reports and resolves?
Okay, well, just before we get into that, I'm curious to know about, and you touched a bit on it, about what the plan is for the cases that are not reported. If they're not reported to police, as you said, and they're reported maybe to community members, who is keeping track, or who is following up? What's happening on that?
So what is really happening is that the Sexual Reproductive Health and Rights Alliance is trying its best to make sure that some of these cases that do not go to police are actually reported to various people that are placed in the communities, referred to by various names with various partners as mentioned. Some of these in the communities we refer to them as peers, while others we refer to them as community health advocates. And what they actually do is to try to go up in the communities and dig out those cases that people are not in position to report to police, and either support them to report them to police or report them to the alliance itself, and then the alliance will take them forward.
Okay.
But also, many of the cases that are not reported to police are reported to LCs, are reported to religious leaders. The bulk of the work that religious leaders do is to settle violence cases.
Are they equipped, the people that they're reporting to handle these cases?
Now, that's where we need to increase our partnerships to make sure that the religious folks across the layer understand how to deal with these cases and how to document these cases. Because if you speak to an imam or a priest, they will say, settling violence cases forms much of the work that we do as religious leaders at the ground.
And I'm very certain it's the same thing with local leaders. The beauty is that the LCs now, the local leaders have been trained, which was not the case so many years ago until when we voted them into power. So now that they have been trained, we have information that they have tried to settle cases that are within their mandate.
Okay.
Then those that are not within their mandate are forwarded to the relevant officials. So the efforts are really there within the communities to try and make sure that some of these cases are reported. Although, again, communities are not yet on the same page. Some feel comfortable having these violence cases and just sitting with them.
The ones, for the cases that are reported, since you both acknowledge that they are actually, they're reported, just not to the channel that we obviously expect, are they keeping track? Do we have numbers for those ones?
I should say that we have cases that we follow up as the Alliance under the SEHAD, a number of these. And what we have done is to develop what we call a case tracker. And this case tracker is supposed to track those so many cases that are reported and follow through the process. But we can't say that we are everywhere. Again, the Alliance is just in the eastern region. So we can't really make mention of the fact that all the cases in the country are being documented. So so many of them are out there and not really followed up.
All right. Yeah. Well, when we're speaking about cases, Hassan, forgive me for cutting you short, what are we talking about? Give me examples of the cases that are being reported.
We are talking about cases of, most people understand beating, rape, defilement. Those are the commonest ones that people understand. But when we talk about gender-based violence in all its forms, it includes so many other things. For example, issues of sexual harassment. People don't report those types of cases, and yet they're part of gender-based violence. So the ones that they report are child neglect, failure to buy food at home, my spouse has beat me up, starving children. Those are the cases that normally are reported. But the tougher cases that constitute much of the burden that the women have, there are a lot of power issues around them to report or not to report. So society has created a system where the victim is kind of timid to go ahead and report those cases.
I think society has made some violence cases a part of them. We see a number of girls being tapped on the breasts or the bums by men or by border men, and it seems a usual thing, but it's not a normal thing. It's actually a case of violence, because when you tap me, what I feel, you may not know what I feel, but that is violence. But also there are some cases that cannot just come up in the limelight. I'm not sure if women can actually come and report cases of marital rape. To those that have tried to report as cases of violence, they have been shunned in the society as people that do not respect their families. But the thing is, this is violence.
Also, the other cases that don't go reported are the little cases that involve violence on men. Because if you went to the police post to report, the people handling your case will say, but what type of man are you? How can you really come here and say that you were beaten? You see, no one wants to listen if you have to go and report a case. So you find that some of the men and young boys cannot go and report because they think that they will think they are not man enough.
They're going to laugh at them. But you know, the funny thing is that it goes both ways. That when women then go to report, they're told, but you did something. So either way, nobody's being listened to when they report these particular cases. But where have we made improvements if we are to look at the work that SRH has done in maybe the previous year? Where have we made strides?
I think I want to make mention of the fact that as the Alliance, we have really worked towards ensuring that some of these are actually brought up in the limelight, and then people that are really concerned take action. I'll give examples. We worked with a journalist and produced the famous Makiwa Before 18 video. And Makiwa Before 18 is really a story of a young girl in Kamoli district who is 16 years of age, who is going to school, who lacks information on, sexual reproductive health. And then before she gets to know, she's expectant for a man, which man then runs away, up to now apparently. So she ends up delivering 3 children. And the question was, okay, how do we prompt the duty bearers to act? it was important that the Health Committee of Parliament actually acted, but by coming up with a motion and a resolution passed on teenage pregnancies and calling upon the line ministries to find out where the various policies that relate to teenage pregnancies and violence actually are. Those that have spent so many in the offing and so many years in the offing and have not actually been implemented. So to us, the mere fact that there's that action by the members of parliament to even see that it's a problem, that is one important thing that has been really improved. But also, there's a lot of information provision within the districts where we are working as the Alliance to ensure that the young girls and the young boys and the men and the women are actually provided with accurate information on sexual reproductive health rights, but also the services in the districts.
How is this being done?
So it is done in various ways. Some of the approaches used are actually approaches of one, looking out for the leaders who are responsible to see if they see or know that there's actually a problem, but also reminding them of their roles and responsibilities in terms of ensuring that girls and boys and men do not actually fall prey or victims of violence. Okay. But also two, reaching out using various ways. Young people are attracted by totally different methods. It might be music. There's an Alliance song, for example. It's called Get Up, Speak Out. It's a song that goes up.
There's a young girl that did that song. It was
exactly.
Brilliant.
But when you listen to the song, it's actually providing information to the young people. The other methods have been methods of trying to ensure that the men, what we call intergenerational dialogues. Where are the young people and the elders, and what do they speak? Okay. What do they speak about, and how do they speak about family planning? How do they speak about sexual reproductive health and rights? How do they even come on the table to speak about the everyday issues that young people face? A thing that we thought that was not there in the time, because elders feel like young girls and boys are actually swayed away on different things, but the question is, when do we come back on table and talk? But also, we've used so much of radio talk shows and empowerments to the various groups of people to make sure that there's information provided.
I feel like, just before you come in, Hassan, I feel like a lot of that is catering for a particular audience. Are we on the social media platforms? What are we using those for, and how are we putting that message out?
Yes, so we are on social media. Most of the young people, by the way, are on social media. And why we are on social media is to try to provide accurate information, because there's a lot of information on social media, but the question is, how accurate is it? So we try to make sure that they follow and tag them in various hashtags, such that at the end of the day, the conversation flows. But also, when we do research, as one of the methodologies, we try to share this research with them, such that it's not just information out there. But you also need to know that a big number of them are not on social media. That's why we actually go to those in schools and those out of schools to try to reach out with this particular information and services, and make them the peers, because we believe that young people, or have known out of practice that young people prefer speaking to young people. But the question is, what are the young people they're listening to providing? What information are they providing?
All right, Hassan?
I think we have also done very well as the Alliance. You see, the young person is not operating alone. Around the young person, there are so many other people that influence how this young person will live life, how this young person will behave. And as the Alliance members, we have done quite well there to also influence the community around the young person, the family. If it is a school, everybody in the school is aware of how to support this young person to live their life. So that has always been the missing link, where you concentrate on the young people, and you want them to change their behavior. But their decisions will be influenced by the thinking of their parents, by the thinking of their teachers, by the thinking of their brothers. Those directly influence this young person. So we have done well to go round the young person and empower everybody, so that this young person lives their life to their full potential.
And that's the whole school approach.
Okay, I was going to say, I'm hoping this includes the teachers who spend quite a number of hours with the young people. In
8 months, to say 8 months out of 12, the teachers are with children.
Correct. And I mean, now we even have daycare centers that become night care centers.
Yeah.
So somebody is raising your child, you know, all the time, and they need to be equipped. All right, let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll be speaking about the gaps that are there, and what they're doing to cover the gaps. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. We're coming to you from the Kampala Serena Conference Center, and this particular episode is done in collaboration with the SRHR Alliance, and we've been joined in the studio by Faith Myra, who is the Youth Country Coordinator for Sexual Reproductive Health Rights Alliance.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us, Faith.
Thank you.
You've been listening to our conversation. Is there anything you'd like to add about the progress that has been made?
Yeah, particularly as the Alliance, we've put the young people at the forefront because we know that Uganda's population is having the majority as young people. So we use young people to reach more young people. We call it the peer education model. And here we have different young people trained and empowered with information to reach out to schools, and they're the ones who give sessions, and they have those different activities they organize as young people. We look at empowering them to meaningfully engage them, not only at the implementation, but also bring them on board in terms of planning and budgeting. So, and the Alliance has done that by ensuring that we have the Youth Advisory Committee, and these people bring issues from the ground, from the young people that reach on the ground in the communities, to the secretariat or to the technical team to allow them to understand what are the issues of young people. So
do you find young people very that they release this information easily? Is it easy for them to talk about the things that affect them?
Yeah, young people always have a challenge if they don't have information, but because they're given this information through their trainings and the capacity building, they have ably demonstrated that they are able to put out this information to other young people, but also reach out to them on social media in terms of messages. Like now we have the 16 days of activism. We have different young people putting information around there on gender-based violence and sexual violence. So young people can ably do this work as long as they're empowered with information.
But also to just make the whole work with young people fun for them. That's what has been able to be done, where the clubs within the school have lots of fun activities that they do that continue to enhance the dialogue on sexual reproductive health issues, but also to provide fun for them so that they can come together always and all the time so that they can continue the dialogue. The nature of activities that they do are ones that are very informative for them, where they have to use their thought process to understand what is the reproductive health challenge from this game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where do you see the gaps? Where the challenges?
Basically, the first gap that I see is there's still an information gap, because we have, like for example, we have the National Sexuality Education Framework that has still not rolled out in schools, but this would be a tool that would be used for young people to access information, but also to be as a guiding tool in terms of schools on how do they reach the SRHR information to young people. So I think there is still an information gap, and that is leading to so many young people making decisions from an informed point of view, and that is getting them to
From an uninformed.
Yeah, from an uninformed point of view. So it's getting them to making decisions that are leading them to teenage pregnancies, HIV infections, STIs, just because, or maybe they're being harassed. They do not know how exactly can we report, how do we get to who. So there is still that information gap on what is the pathway to.
Faith, you've spoken about sexuality education. Where did you get your education?
Basically, as I was in school, there was no such thing of sexuality education, and it was more of like from friends online, and most of the time we're getting the wrong information and at campus. So when I got to learn the sexuality education is when I became a volunteer with Research Development at the time, and that's when I got to really understand what is sexuality education, what is reproductive health in general, but that is a chance I got when I've already finished school. But then there are so many things that happen in schools that we need this information.
Hassan, was it the same for you? I know that not so many men are in this field. So to have one in this field pushing this agenda begs the question, where did you get your sexuality education?
I remember my first attempt to education on sexuality. My dad finds a condom in the boys' room. And then he says, "What is this? Who has brought this?" I was a very young boy. Then my brother said,
Young, how young?
I was, I think, about 13 years old. Then my elder brother says, It is for that one, I was teaching that one. Now, I knew nothing about a condom at that time. And here is my elder brother saying, I was teaching that one. So I just looked at him and said, what is all this going around? So that was even the first time I saw a condom. And then I kept asking, what is this all about? So my first form of education was actually from radio, because I could get a lot of information through radio. At that time, the Straight Talk radio show in English was running on radio stations, and there were not that many radio stations, so you could find time to listen. So for me, my first form of education was through media.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most effective now that is working for young people, and how do we capitalize on that more?
Young people need to talk with young people, because the young people, when they have a problem, for example, a young boy who is struggling with erections, when he has a problem with that erection, he's not going to go and ask a teacher. That young boy will go and ask a friend, because he believes that this friend also is going through the same problem.
So they understand.
So most likely he's going to give me some advice. So we need to make sure that young people are empowered with the information, because they are the first source of information for other young people. And we need to do more of that. Then the others can add on.
Do you think that sexuality education, and this is for the both of you, is very critical in ending the violence that we see?
Oh, yes. Yes. Because in sexuality education, we are learning how our body works, how it responds, and what we should do in order not to put our body in trouble. That's what we learn in sexuality education. So you need to understand managing emotions, for example. You need to understand interpersonal relations. You need to understand skills of living with other people. So if you don't understand that, then you are bound to get problems. So when you take into sexuality education and people understand themselves and how to relate with each other and how to respond to feelings, then we have a greater chance of reducing sexual violence and all other forms of violence, especially when people are aware that this is not right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think sexuality education is very critical, especially for the young people. First of all, it gives you the power to make the decision that you are well aware of and you'll be responsible of. Because at the end of the day, I believe if there are people out there that do not know that tapping me on my breast or on my butt is sexual harassment, and it's something I can report. But as our young girls in schools get used to something like that, that is when they're able to be lured into sexual activities, and they're being harassed, maybe they're being defiled. So I think just having the information that this is how I should refuse, because even the refusal skills come from not knowing exactly what is wrong and right on my body. How do I have the power over my body? So if they can learn the information of what is wrong on my body, how do I respond to it? Who do I approach in case something gets to a point where I can't handle it myself? Because we have so many people having depression, and they're being maybe feeling discriminated because of something that they don't know how to go about it. But empowering them with information gives them the right and the power to make that decision on what steps to take, on how to refuse something, how do I be able not to get into this dark corner that will probably lead to my harassment. So information is like the power the young people need to be able to make the decisions and even take legal action if that calls for it, or even know who exactly to hold accountable. Is it the head teacher? Is it the senior woman teacher? Is it the parent at home that is exposing them to that? And how do they get the courage to move on?
Faith, are you still in school?
No.
Okay.
For me, Josephine, especially for the young boys.
Just curious, I'm curious, when did you leave school?
I graduated last year in 2018.
Was sexuality education already in schools? Is it there? Is there any semblance of sexuality education?
Yeah, in terms of, we used to have those girls' meetings in terms of senior woman teachers. What I did not like about my sexuality education at the time is they used to get the girls the other side and the boys this side. So it happens that most of the time it was about menstruation, how you should keep yourself healthy and all that. But when it comes to terms of how do you address sexual harassment, how do you report a teacher that is assaulting you, there were no such things in terms of how. So this is the information that is lacking, the gap. Yes, we have addressed the menstrual health, which is still a challenge, but how do I, because when you start menstruation, that's the time you start having the feelings, you start having all these mood swings, and you need support. But young people do not know how to.
Did you ever have any of that education, maybe in your holidays from the community, maybe the traditional ways of aunties and maybe uncles, maybe churches, church leaders? Is there anything like that?
Not necessarily as that. The information that we're given in communities is quite more indirect. It's like in churches, we're told to abstain, we're told to
dress decently.
Yeah, dress decently. We're told to respect elders. We're told those are the things, the morals we're taught in churches, in communities. For our mothers, particularly my mom, is something she never wanted. Actually, even when you bring it across, it will be like as if you're embarrassing her, literally, to ask such a question. So literally, the conversations we'd have is more of like how you keep clean, how do you wash your clothes, how do you wash your knickers, and particularly also how do you you should report those men that are disturbing you. But in actual sense, there was no deeper discussion of what exactly is entailing the disturbing me.
Yes. Okay. Hassan, you wanted to say
Myra
something?
raises a very strong point, especially with young boys. Much of the work, because the girl child is more victimized, is the one who is sexually harassed, is the one who is defiled, is the one who is raped. So we find that most of the programs are concentrating on the girl child, which is not a bad thing. But then we need to stop and ask ourselves, why should we teach girls taekwondo? Why should we teach girls not to walk outside at night alone? Why doesn't the boy behave himself? Why don't we teach the boys to behave themselves, to manage their own sexuality, to manage their sexual feelings, to control their own emotions, so that the girl child remains safe? So programming needs to, and this is what we're doing in the Alliance, programming needs to spread out and also get to that boy and say, hey, young boy, this is how you manage your feelings. You don't go around.
Why do you think it is not being done?
It's not being done because the approach of the oppressed are the ones who rise up, okay? So people forgot about the boy child, forgot about the men and boys because, well, they are men. They're expected to know these things, you see? And the knowledge that we have seen from them is actually bad knowledge that sexually harasses, that rapes, that what. They don't know how to control their sexual feelings. So we need to get the boys also down and say, these are feelings, this is how your body reacts when you feel like this is how you can control that. Then we leave the girls safe.
What would you as a young person want to see your fellow young people do to help themselves?
I would just want to call out the young people out there that silence is not the way to go. If you're going through something, the first step you need to do is talk to someone. Find someone you trust. Might be a parent, might be a class teacher, might be a friend. But you need to talk to probably a student leader, because silence is leading us to more problems. So all young people there need to speak out about the harassment, about the issues that they're feeling that they're being violated, and they are not able to know to see how they can address them. So the first step is talk to someone. The second step is, there are so many different platforms that we can address these issues. We have different, with the Alliance, we have the Sauti Plus app, where young people address, which with our partner Reach a Hand, Uganda, they address different issues online in terms of what is happening and how can they go about it. So they can still reach out through such platforms, but also looking out maybe on the different pages of young people talking about sexuality on terms, so they need to reach out to someone. And then another thing I would like to see about young people is they need to be proactive in learning exactly what is the procedure, because one weakness that young people we do have is basically we are more reluctant in terms of learning information. So if we can learn the procedures, what is the step to take? Which kind of person can I report to? How can I hold my parent accountable? How can I hold my leader accountable? So I'm calling upon young people out there to learn more, to take time and read and understand what is exactly that. But also I want to call out on the government to roll out the school health policy that has been pending for 18 years. This would be a good guideline in terms of schools. What kind of structures can they put down for young people, for them to be in a healthy environment that is free from harassment and all that? So I think for me, young people is let's empower ourselves more, and let also the adults give the young people platforms to be able to learn, because without the platforms they will not learn, and if they do not learn, they ignorantly continue suffering of sexual gender-based violence in
And
their
like you
community.
said earlier, young people listen more to young people.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Let's take another short break, and Noor will be joining us after the break. Thank you very much, Faith, for taking the time.
It's been a pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. We're coming to you from the Kampala Serena Conference Center, and Noor has joined us once again. Thank you for coming back. You were listening to us as we spoke about sexuality education with Faith. I thought it would be important to have a young person actually give their perspective on these matters. What do you think about sexuality education and what we can do with it to help the situation?
Well, I think as a country, we are still struggling to draw the difference between sex education and sexuality education. And to me, it was very, very commendable when the president of this republic committed to, during the International Conference on Population and Development that just happened in Nairobi, committed to finalization and implementation of the National Sexuality Education Framework. That was really important, because it's one thing to have a framework, but the second thing is the commitment from the head of states really coming up to say that there's this commitment, and the commitment is really meant to ensure that there's some reduction of the high rates of teenage pregnancies that we have. So I think while we're still grappling, the lack of the policies that perhaps would help us understand some of the key issues that we struggle with as parents, as teachers, as leaders from various angles would become more important. If, for example, we had the school health policy passed and implemented, it has been in the offing for the last 18 years. And while we really commend the Ministry of Education that steps have really been taken to ensure that this comes up, we still have questions on what do we then do if we cannot really go ahead and teach, for example, sexuality education because the policy is not rolled out. So I think we still have a long way to go, but the beauty again is that we are committed as a country to actually take the conversations forward. And I'm sure if various line ministries then jumped on board and played their role, I know the Ministry of Gender is coming up with a family policy. If the family policy read in line with the school health policy plus the National Sexuality Education Framework, I'm very sure that we'll get somewhere in terms of sexuality education in this country.
Okay. Hassan, speak to me about gender transformative approaches to ending this violence.
We need to start to think about everybody. We need to design programs that meet the needs and interests of young girls, young boys, children, men and women, in a way that everybody's needs are understood and everybody gets what they deserve. We need to have, for example, policies playing a balance, not taking, because in this country in the beginning, when you spoke about the word gender, it would mean women.
Exactly.
Even in our own ministry, gender means women. For so many people, when you say gender, they mean women. Now, that is what we need to change. We need to understand that gender means everybody. Gender is relational. When you're advocating, for example, for menstrual hygiene management, the language of advocacy should also include young boys. What do you want them to know about menstruation, and what do you want them to do? The Alliance members are doing a good job because boys are making pads for girls, reusable pads for girls. So we need to be able to get to that level of transformation. That is when we build a society that is supporting each other, that everybody is respecting each other, and we're moving on an equal basis.
When you speak about a society that should be engaged in these conversations, talk to us about what role they should play. I know one of the key factors that keeps coming up is the media. What do we do better?
I usually say media either makes you or fails you. I have a belief that the media reaches out to thousands, billions, trillions of people more than anyone can do. The reason we get to know what's happening in America is because of media. The reason why America gets to know what's happening in Uganda is because of media. So when it comes to sexual reproductive health and rights, the media has played a role and still has a big role to play. One, you get to know a lot of information from various angles. And to me, reaching out to the communities with all this information across the platforms becomes important. And the angles that I'm referring to here, angles from the line ministries, you will reach, for example, the Minister of Health. A person in Kamwenge might not reach the Minister of Health, but you have the power. The question is, how do you get this power and information from wherever you got it for the communities? So you reach out to so many people who have various information. Just like this show, I'm very certain that the many who are going to watch this are people that wouldn't have reached out as an alliance if it wasn't for media.
For me, media, what media needs to do more is that media needs to have some self-accountability. What do I mean by that? It is good to expose injustices, but it is also good to even go further and hold those who commit the injustices to account to the human rights principles that our country has signed to. It is also good that when the media knows this and this is an injustice to women, is an injustice to boys, the same media cannot again be seen promoting or pushing a music video or a song that perpetuates injustices. If we know that sexual harassment is not a good thing, should we as the media be channeling out material that perpetuates sexual harassment? Because where else do people learn to do some of these crazy things? They learn them from the media. So for me, that's what I want the media to do more than what they have been doing.
Right.
I also think that there's need to be some bits of regulation, especially when it comes to sexual reproductive health and rights. What is provided out on social media? Who regulates? Very important, because a number of people access social media, but sometimes the regulation is minimal.
Well, we've seen that there are steps being made in that effort, not just for sexual reproductive health, but rights, but also for other things that affect the country. What is the role of the government then in this regard in our conversation?
I think one is that, truthfully, the government has provided the platform for us to even speak today. Others wouldn't be speaking. But while we commend the government for what it has done, I think its major role still lies with finalization of policies. It pains, especially to us that go to communities, for us to speak to people that have been in school and out of school without a school health policy. It's a pain. The question is, who has provided this information to them? It pains for us to sing every day that we have these policies in the offing but go nowhere. So that's one big role of government. It's beyond passing of policies. If we had the school health policy out, if we had the regulations to the National Sexual Education Framework, we are now going back to conducting interviews again and doing research on the framework. When will it ever come? Who is going to teach our children? What are they going to be taught? I mean, so looks like our hands are tied. You need to know that the government came up and banned the teaching of sexuality education framework. Sexuality education in schools, and the Minister of Gender said, not just in schools, but on Ugandan soil. From the time the ban came up to now, what are we telling children? What are we telling young people? Who is guiding them? Aren't we ashamed as a country? So I think the government has a role to play, a huge role, to clear the hands and pass these policies out, but also implement.
Well, you mentioned who is teaching our children now, and I think that takes me to my next call of action. What do you tell the educators? What do you tell the parents? And what do you tell the local leaders? What is their role?
The local leaders need to know the right information to say. Because we have local leaders who are churning out completely controversial pieces of information, false information, I'll say. So the local leaders, because they command some kind of respect, they also need to take time to know the right information, so that all of us are speaking the same correct thing. When young people hear the same thing from so many people, they take it serious. What we take as important is what they take as serious. So we need to coordinate. We need to say the correct information. But there's a lot of wrong information and falsehoods, where even no research, no science supports it, and the local leader comes out and says something. And it will, the media will carry it all over the place as satire, but that satire in itself is disorganizing minds of young people. I know media wants things that are comic and funny and what, because those are the ones that attract audience, but the repercussions, the ripple effect is very dangerous for us. You have to go to undo so many things, and the lives of young people are gone.
So you've spoken about local leaders, parents and educators.
Parents and educators, it goes back to the home. It goes back to the home. A lot of education must happen in the home. So we need to get parents. The best person to teach me about managing life is someone who is older than me. Parents have gone through challenges of menstruations, challenges of body changes, and many other things. They are keeping quiet. They are keeping quiet because culture says you cannot talk to your daughter.
Do you blame them? This is how they were socialized.
Yes, that's how they were socialized, but the good news is that socialization can change. We can de-socialize ourselves. That is the good news.
I really want to think that parents need to understand that society has changed. It's not the society where we grew up from, where you were actually a child of the community. It is a society where young people are getting information across the board. So parents have got to create time for their children. While almost 80% of the time of the children is spent in schools, we now have a holiday of 2 months. And I think as parents have the time now with their children at home. It might not be 3-4 hours. It can be 10 minutes in a child's time that is going to change things for the child. So before you go to bed, call the child. Speak to them something for 10 minutes. Understand how they live their life. And don't be tough, because I think one thing that has chased away these young people from their parents is the toughness. The toughness is because you grew up in a different society. Society has changed. Accept that it has changed and try to make sure that the child really fits. But also I think that within communities we have what we call opinion leaders. Leaders that are respected in societies who play a huge role. And I think the call goes back to Ministry of Gender. Where is the policy that actually provides information to the parents and elders? I know there is a policy on guidance, but it lacks issues of sexuality education.
The good news, though, is that Ministry of Gender is developing the parenting agenda for this country. And some of us who are participating in that process are very strong on some of these issues to constitute the parenting agenda. There are also parenting guidelines. So we have opportunities. But the other thing is that when we have these opportunities, we are very good at passing things. We're very good at passing. Even us from civil society, we chase for these policies, they get passed and what? And government will say, we have done our part. Our part is policy environment. We have finished our part. No funding, no monitoring, no nothing. It is left to the civil society to do the work. So we need also to find a way of how do we create monitoring systems and reporting systems for some of these policies. The National Strategy on Ending Child Marriages is coming to an end. Where have we been monitoring? Did we even finance it as government? So there are lots of challenges that we need to deal with.
All right. Our time is fast spent, but I know this particular episode was sponsored by the Sexual Reproductive Health Rights Alliance, for which all of these organizations fall under. What is their pledge as we close?
Well, I think as the Sexual Reproductive Health and Rights Alliance, we shall continue to provide the information, but we shall also continue to ask the government to pass the policies, fund them, and implement them. And we shall monitor them.
Hassan?
The call from us is that everybody needs to acquaint themselves with the truth, and we want people to talk always, Talk now and talk often to the young people.
All right. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us on these very pertinent issues. Thank you, Faith, as well, who is sitting back there, for participating in this conversation. We appreciate your input as a young person. They always say that we have conversations about young people without them present. So it was good that we had you speaking on their behalf. Well, that brings us to the end of our show for tonight. Thank you for watching. Coming up is NTV Weekend Edition.